And welcome back to the shop. This video is going to be pretty much all about spark plugs, your 2-strokes, your 4-strokes. I'm going to cover both of them. Got a lot to cover here, so it's going to be quick, but let's dig in. I'm first going to start a little bit on the 4-strokes. This is something I'm going to cover right from the beginning because I see this mistake a lot of times from technicians and mechanics when they're trying to diagnose a bike's running issue or it doesn't start. I'm just going to dig right into this one. I need to get this out there because I see this mistake often. People seem to think with these 4-stroke plugs, as long as you can see it sparking, like when you on the bike, you pull the plug out of the cylinder, you hook the spark plug cap back onto it, and you ground it on the frame, and you hit the start button or you kick the bike. As long as you can see it sparking, hey, the spark plug must be good, right? It's sparking. Put it back in. Maybe that's not why it's starting, and let's keep looking. A lot of times it actually was this. Even though it was sparking, you put a new plug in and the bike will fire right up. I've seen it over and over again. I've had people, I'll give you one example. I have several, but I'll give you one. RMZ 450 was brought to me 2016. It was already at a motorcycle motocross repair shop, a well-known place here in Florida, but I'm not going to mention any names. And they sent it out. They couldn't figure it out. This one would bog as you got in the throttle. It would start up, it would idle when you get in the throttle, it would bog. And they checked everything's fine. They think everything's good, so they just can't figure out why it's doing it. And then it was taken to a dealership. The dealership couldn't figure it out. Finally, the guy brought it to me. Who am I? You know, and anytime I get any kind of weird issues like this, I start with the simple stuff, the cheap stuff, the simple stuff. I just do a new spark plug in it, and it actually fixed the problem. That's example number one. Actually, I'll give you a couple more examples. The CRF 450, we were at the track, and my friend Austin, if you're watching this video, what's up, bro? His bike was stalling, just randomly stalling as it's idling. It was running fine on the track, but just as it was idling, it would just die. And he'd have to start it back up, and and I said, well, let's try a new plug. I actually had a plug in my toolbox for his Honda, and his buddy there, I'm not going to mention his name, don't want to embarrass him, actually gave us a crazy look. Like, he was like, that ain't going to fix it. And it fixed it. I know because I've seen it myself. It completely fixed the problem. It would just misfire every so often and idle. And on extreme cases, I've had bikes that just wouldn't run. I've actually had friends and customers of mine call me up, hey, these are known good bikes, you know. And I got one lap, and it's happened to me too, but I got in one lap around the track, and the bike died, and it won't start. I don't know what's going on. And I tell them, before we go digging in, just pop a new spark plug in. Well, I pulled the spark plug out, put it on the frame, it's sparking, so it can't be the plug. Just try a new spark plug. They call me back, and they think I'm a genius. You're a genius. It was a spark plug. I'm not a genius. I just been doing this for a while, and I've seen this over and over again. So yeah, if your 4-stroke is not running or bogging at certain RPMs, or just dying at idle. Them are the three things that I've seen happen with these spark plugs. Just change the plug first. I mean, as long as everything else feels normal. The motor was sounding fine when it was running. It's not locked up, meaning if it's got a Kickstarter, you can push down the Kickstarter and it feels normal. You can feel compression. It's moving down fine. If it's electric start, if you hit the start button and it still sounds normal, and it just sounds like normal bike. Before you pull the tank off and check the fuel pressure, before you do all that stuff, just throw a plug in. You should always have a spare plug with you while you're at the track, or at least at home. Throw a plug in it first. You know, I don't even bother checking them, stick them to the frame, and see if I can see. I don't even waste my time doing that anymore. I just throw a new plug in it, and if it fixes the issue, I know it's the plug. If it doesn't fix the issue, well, that bike just got a new plug. Let's keep digging. So I needed to get that out there because I have seen this. I have had multiple bikes brought to me that other technicians or mechanics could not fix. They just overlooked the spark plug. It's the simplest thing sometimes, and people overlook them. And we're going to be jumping back and forth from 2-strokes, 4-strokes, 2-strokes, 4-strokes as we go along in this video. 2-strokes, pretty much the same things. You know, if your bike doesn't start, and or it was running fine and all of a sudden it started breaking up, or it was running fine, it broke up and it died. I mean, most people kind of generally know that at this point on 2-strokes, that they do foul plugs every so often. That's not unknown. Everyone kind of knows that, but I still need to cover it in this video because I do get the phone call every so often. I just rebuilt a bike for someone, They go home, they ride it around for half a day. All of a sudden they call me up, hey man, I was riding, it just died. What the heck, man? First thing I ask them is, how's the Kickstarter feel? Well, it feels the same. I got compression. That all feels good. All right, you got a new spark plug on you? No? Well, go buy a new spark plug. Put it in. You should have one on you. They put the spark plug back in. They call me up. Oh, that fixed it. Started right up. All right, there you go. Make sure you grab another spark plug just in case. Always have a spare spark plug with you when you're at the track. It's just something good to have. So, two strokes, it can happen too. And it's the same situation. You will put it on the frame, you know, pull it out, put it on the frame, kick the bike, and you will see spark. You'll think, well, it's sparking, but you put it in the bike and it doesn't spark, or it doesn't run. Now, I don't know why that is. I only can speculate. What I believe happens is, I believe this, it could be wrong. Maybe someone out there knows, and you can comment and let us know. There are people that really know spark plugs. I just know how to fix these things. So, I believe that the porcelain down up in here gets a crack or whatever, and when the spark plug's out, there's no load on the spark, so it's easy to jump that gap. It's easier to jump the gap right here where you can visually see it than it is to jump wherever that crack is in here. But once you put it in the bike, now it's under compression, and when it compresses all that charge, it's a denser environment for the spark to jump this gap. So now it's under load, and it's harder to jump it right here, but for some reason up in here where the porcelain's at, wherever that crack is at, it's now easier for it to jump right there to ground out the spark, and you won't get a spark here and the bike won't run. That's just what I think happens, but I don't know. And same with the two strokes. So that's why I believe you'll see a spark, but you put it in the bike and it won't run. All right, had to get that out of the way. Okay, now let's go ahead and jump into setting the gap on your spark plug. Typically, they come pre-gapped if you're using the correct plug for your bike. The exact model is supposed to be in your bike. Like this goes in your Honda 450 right here. But they'll come in the package with this sleeve that protects the spark plug gap. And typically, you can just throw it in the bike and it's going to be fine. It's going to run fine. But if you're a stickler and you want to check your gap, and I do suggest checking it, it's best to use a set of feelers gauges and not one of these little things that you slide right here to set your spark plug gap. And the reason being is because a lot of times in these modern day bikes, they have that small little tip right there. Some use platinum, some use iridium. You can see it has like a little, if I can get the camera to focus, you can see it has like a little tip. Come on, focus. Here, I'll do it like this. It has a little tip on it, and you can see it right up in there. Yeah, that little tip, and you just don't want to damage any of that, right? So when you slide that piece, you can bend it, you can damage it, you can even pop that tip off. You don't want to do that. So it's best to use a set of feelers gauges to check the gap. If you have a bike that has a significantly fat gap to it, sometimes you might have to stack two of these up and do the math. That just happens sometimes. You know, just make sure they're real clean, stack them up, check the gap. But most cases you'll be able to just use you know, one on these dirt bikes. They typically don't come that fat. Like this one seems to be right about 7.75 millimeters. And that's how you check it. Now, and same thing with your two strokes, exact same thing. You don't want to slide that bar. You don't want to use this. The only type of plug I would say I would consider this somewhat safe for is your standard plugs. Let me see if I can find one here. I don't even think I have one here. Let me see. Okay, I found one, but it's a dirty one. This is a non-resistor. It's a BAES. It's missing the R right there, which stands for resistor. And it's your typical two-stroke plug. These are the standard ones. The ones that end with the S is the only one that I would consider this fairly safe to use one of these. And the main reason why is the electrode in the center there is really fat and it's just hard to damage. And on these you can use it and even, you know, just widen the spark plug gap, or to tighten it up, you just on something that's nice and firm and you can tighten up the gap. That's about the only type of plug that I would say safe to use one of these on. Otherwise, you're going to want to use a set of feelers gauges. Now, if you have to make corrections, if you have to make the gap tighter on these plugs, like I just pointed out, you just find something to tap down on. Hey, dude, no one called you in here. Now, if you did have to make any adjustments to the spark plug gap, if you have to tighten it, just something solid, like something solid, hard tables, even concrete, honestly, just anything you can find, and you just try to tap right there on that spot of the ground strap. Just tick, 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 tick. It doesn't take much. Tap, start soft, check your gap, tap it again if you have to, and keep tapping harder until you get it to start moving. And that's how you tighten it up. Now it's a little bit different if you have to widen it up. If you have to widen it up, again, you don't want to stick anything in here. At least I don't. You don't want to stick anything in here and try to pry up. Well, if you can get something really thin in there, maybe if you can press against the wall, but that's not how I do it. I'll show you how I do it. I go through my toolbox and I find the perfect set of pliers that allow me to, let me get on here for you, to grab it just like that without actually hitting the center electrode. You see, I'm not hitting it, and then I can grab it and I can just bend it up. So just take your time, find that right pair of pliers that allow you to just grab the, and I have even been able to get lucky enough and grab it like this up here and bend it up that way. But usually I just take my time, find some pliers that allow me to get a good grab like this, and I can open up the gap that way. The whole idea is you can play with that ground strap quite a bit, not hurt anything. You just don't want to bump the electrode in the middle. You want to keep that thing pretty much completely untouched. You just don't want to damage that. And it's the same with the two strokes. So you have to do the gap on the two strokes, same thing. Typically on a two stroke and a four stroke, the stock gap, whatever the manual recommends for that bike, is going to be pretty good. And they usually give you a range to work with, like let's say 20 thousandths to 24 thousandths or whatever, and anywhere in that range is going to be fine. And when you're checking your gap, and keep in mind, it doesn't, like if you're using a feeler's gauge, it doesn't have to be parallel perfectly like that as you slide it in. Whatever angle, if it takes a little bit of angle to get the tightest one in there, then that's actually your gap. What you're trying to measure is exactly how far that spark is going to have to jump from here to there. And so it doesn't matter if it's straight or if it's at an angle. Just, you know, find the biggest one that fits in there without no friction. Usually what I'll do is I'll find the one that I can't get in there, and I'll keep going one feeler's gauge at a time, and I will just keep gently sliding in there, you know, until I can get it in there. And that is that's the reading, the spark plug gap reading. It doesn't matter if I had to lift it up a little bit like this to get it in there, or if I had to go perfectly parallel. As long as I can get this in there without any real friction, that's going to be my spark plug gap reading. And on the four strokes, I typically just set them to stock, and that's good. I've never had an issue setting these to whatever the stock spark plug gap is. Two strokes can be a little bit different on some bikes. There's some bikes that can exhibit a pop when you go to shift real quick and hard. Mainly just your smaller bore ones like 125s here. If while you're under a load you go to shift real hard and fast, you get a thunk out of the motor. Sometimes better fuel can get rid of that. You know, using a higher ratio of race gas or 100% race gas. But usually it's just your spark is getting blown out. I don't know exactly what causes that. I do have my theories, and my theory is the pipe, as you know, is more or less a turbo, and when you get it up at higher RPMs and you have that resonance going and you slip a shift in real quick and it drops your RPMs down, the pipe is still singing at the previous resonance, and I believe it kind of overstuffs the combustion chamber, and it's a little bit too much for the spark to spark through. And the reason I kind of came to that conclusion is because I've noticed that when a CDI, aftermarket CDI, that is supposed to create more spark is used, it seems to clear that up on these bikes. But another fix for that is to just check your spark plug gap. Again, most of the time they come out the box pretty gap, but you know, you want to check it. I'll give you a quick example. The YZ125 here calls for a 24 to 28 thousandths of a spark plug gap, right? And in my experience, as soon as that spark plug gap gets over 28 thousandths, even a hair, it starts popping on me on them fast, hard shifts. I typically can tell when my spark plug gap has gotten too wide, because it'll start doing that. I'll pull the spark plug out, run my feeler's gauge through it, and find that it has become a little wider, and I'll just tap it back down to 28 thousandths, and she's good to go again. Now, it's not that they change on their own, but it's just there's erosion, right? So the ground strap gets eroded a little bit from sparking consistently, you know, all the time, and even though they do put platinum tips on it and they're supposed to be more resistant to that, it still does happen. You will find your gap gets a little bit wider through time. And so if you start getting them pops and the plug's still good and you just don't want to throw a new plug in it, you know, sometimes these plugs can be a little bit expensive and you don't want to change them out all the time, just check your gap. Maybe all you have to do is just tighten your gap back down into the specs, and that'll clean that right up. Alright, let's get into heat ranges for just a second. I'll start with this right here. You see how this is a BR9EG? The 9 right there, that's your heat range, right? So, and the higher the number, the colder the plug. So if that's a 9 and this is a 10, well, this is a colder plug because it's a higher number. We have over here, let me see, there we go, that's it. That's an 8. Now it's missing the R right there, right before the numerical 8. That R stands for a resistor. All these characters mean something, but we're focusing on right now the numerical number in the middle here of the plug, which is on this one's a 9. That's your heat range. And so this is an 8. That's a hotter plug. The 9's a colder plug. Now, first, we're going to talk about 4 strokes when you should change your heat range. Stock heat range on these modern day 4 strokes are usually pretty much dead on, and you can run it. You know, there have been times in the past that the manufacturer's kind of gotten it wrong. One example of that was the 2014 YZ450. When this bike first came out, they suggested a CR8E for about 2 years, until about 2015, if I remember correctly. And in 2015, when that bike came out, they moved it, which was the same motor from 2014 to 2015, but they went from a CR8E to a CR9E. And within a short period of time later, I also started noticing, even on the part schematics here, that they were now recommending a CR8E for the plug on that bike. Now, before they did that, though, I was already running a 9 in the YZ450 because me and my brother both noticed that as the bike got hot, it would produce a little pop out of the exhaust sometimes when you let go of the throttle and things like that. And I kind of suspected the plug was just getting a little bit too hot. I went to a 9, and that completely fixed that. And then, lo and behold, next year later, now Yamaha suggesting a 9 for the YZ450, which was awesome. It's what it needed. It needed a colder plug. I guess it just took them a year to figure that out. But that's how it goes sometimes, and at least they corrected it. So sometimes the heat range that manufacturer has, it might be too hot for what for your conditions or your bike. But you'll have to figure that out on your own. But in most cases, just go with the stock heat range and you're going to be fine. The 2 strokes can be a little bit different in that aspect. I recommend anyone that's running a 2-stroke hard. If you're a fast rider, if you truly are like getting in that throttle, you know, you're really using that motor. You gotta understand, most of the people that buy these bikes, most of them are sold to people are not gonna really use it. Yeah, they get full throttle here or there, but they're not doing it lap after lap and really starting to soak some heat into that motor. That's how these, you know, the average riders using these bikes are they're not using them that hard. But if you are one of them guys, if you're a racer and you're doing lap after, you can go out there and knock out a 20-minute moto and go full throttle pretty much out of every corner until the next obstacle. Definitely consider 1 heat range colder plug than what is stock. And I really can't stress that enough. Seriously, if you're on a 2-stroke and you're the type of guy that's really running hard, just do yourself a favor, go 1 heat range colder than what is stock. On these 2-strokes, they're trying to send them out with a heat range that's middle ground, right? They're worried about fouling. So when they sell a bike, if they sell it to your average rider, it's kind of a mediocre rider, and it's fouling a plug, you know, daily, people kind of complain about that, right? So they try to set them up for a medium ground where the faster guy will be somewhat okay, but the slower guy will be somewhat okay. But if you truly are a faster guy, you're going to need that colder plug. Don't worry, you're not going to foul it, right? Because you're getting that motor hot. So like on the YZ 250 2-stroke, it comes with a 8 stock. So for that bike, I run a 9 on my YZ 250, and it does the trick. And there's other videos where I discuss that pretty much in detail, where I would actually hear that the bike was running hot. It would sound different when you first fire it up and you're riding out from the pit to the track. No matter if you've ridden the bike already that day, if you're taking a 15-minute break, you start the bike up and you're heading out to the track, it sounds perfect, just great. But when you come off the track, the motor just has a little bit of a different sound to it. It doesn't feel quite the same. Your plug's probably just getting a little too hot. Step it up to a 9, that'll go away. It'll come off the track the way it went on. And for the 125s, I typically run a 10. You can see they come stock with a 9. I run a 10. And again, that keeps that kind of stuff from happening. Plus, you get them hot enough, trust me, you can start, they come apart. They'll start coming apart in here. You get them too hot. So just run one heat range cooler if you're really heavy on the throttle on the 2-stroke, and you'll be good and safe. And if you haven't noticed yet, I'm pretty much only showing NGK plugs here. Most of your manufacturers on these modern day motocross bikes come stock with NGK plugs, and that's just kind of what I'm familiar with, and that's just what we're talking about today. But that being said, we're going to go back to 4-strokes for just a second. They have different level plugs. Some of your bikes already come with the iridium plugs in them, like your Hondas do and stuff, and that's pretty, your OEM Honda plugs, pretty much about the best plug you can buy for that bike. Just go ahead and get that plug. If you like special plugs, it already comes with one. The Yamaha's a little different. It comes to the CR9E. That's pretty much a standard plug. It's not your higher end one. So let me show you a picture here. There's a CR9E. You can see the electrode in the middle there is a little bit fat, and it's just a standard plug. It's a good plug, but it's a standard plug. But if you want the better plug, you go to, let me go to it here. You go to the CR9EIX, which pretty much stands for their iridium, and you'll see that now it has that thinner electrode, and the ground strap is kind of squared, or not squared off, but kind of angled off a little bit. So if you want the better plug, you'll pay a few dollars more for it. But you can get the EIX, the iridium plugs for your bike, if it comes with a standard plug, be it a Yamaha or Suzuki or Kawasaki, whatever brand it is. If it has a standard plug, there will be a iridium upgrade for it. Just do your research. Make sure you pick the same heat range on the 4-stroke if that's what you're good with. And the same for the 2-strokes. Your most basic plug is your S plug. So this is a BR8ES. This is the cheapest plug you can buy, $2 to $3. Comes with the big old fat electrode right there. And it's just your standard plug. But then the next level plug up is the BR8EG. That's your next level plug. It comes with your standard electrode still. It's not iridium or platinum or anything like that, but it's just more narrow. It's just a more narrow electrode, and that's your next level up plug, and that just costs a few dollars more. Then they got your next level up, which will be your BR8EV. Now that one does come with it's a iridium, and you can see it does come with a thinner electrode, and yeah, so that's your next level up. But hey, they even have one higher than that, which is your EIX. So this is a BR8 EIX. Again, choose the heat range that you need. The H is just the heat range. I'm just showing they have different levels of these plugs, and that's your highest level plug for this type of 2-stroke plug. And of course, some of your Kawasaki's, like your KX85s and your 105s, 112s, 100s, they come with a totally different type of plug on their own, as well as your older RM125s and RM250s. They also have their own plugs too. But you can use your standard BRs in them, your BR10 EGs, BR11 EGs, or EIXs, or whatever. They do work. Like this is your plug for the KX85 here. And this is actually, it says 105. That's a 10.5 heat range is what that is. But, you know, they have their own little special plug. You know, you can buy that if you want, or you can, you know, change it up a little bit. It's up to you. As for me, I'll talk about myself for a minute. I personally like using these ECMIX plugs. These come stock in the KTM 125, 250s, 200, the 2-strokes. You'll find these in your KTMs. I like these plugs on my current YZ125 and my YZ250, but they're not for every bike. And I'll get into that in a second. You might find a different plug might work better for you. Okay, I'm going to screw this in right here real quick. Of course, I run one heat range colder. This plug is, you'll notice it's a little concave in there, and everything sits deeper. I don't know if that light makes it better or not, but all right, everything sits a little deeper. Let's see if I can focus like that. Everything sits a little deeper up in there, more on the ceiling. Obviously, the head would sit on the bike like that, but everything sits up in there a little bit deeper with this ECMIX plug compared to your standard type plug, which I'll pop one of these in real quick. let's see here. Here you go. You'll see this one sits out more, just kind of, it's flat right there, and everything sits a little bit more out and up, and a little bit more into the middle of the combustion chamber. Here you go. This is a standard plug. This is a stock plug for the YZ125. This is what they come with stock, the BR9 EIX. And I'll screw this one in for you, since this is a YZ125 head, and I'll show you how. Now, obviously, it's a used plug, but yeah, I'll show you what I mean. All right, you can see how it sits up out there pretty good. Let me screw the other one in. So what I found with the ECMIX plug is it seems to increase my top end rev some and smoothing it out up top, especially after the motor's already had a couple modifications, mainly the head. So, you know, but it works great on my 21. We tried it in my brother's 23 YZ125. Okay, here you go. You can see again how it sits. The ground strap and the electrode in the middle sit more up in there, and they concaved the outer edge there because of that. So it sits more up into the ceiling of the head. And again, we tried this plug out on my brother's YZ125. He pretty much has the same setup that I have as far as modifications, and it didn't work so great in his. But the newer one is also a natural rubber on its own, so maybe that's the case. But for my 21, this plug is amazing. It's great. And even my YZ250, I run the 9 version of this plug, the BR9 ECMIX, and it does great on my YZ250. So these are the plugs that I'm currently using on my YZ250 and my 2021 YZ125. And lastly, looking at your spark plug to see, are you running rich? Are you running lean? What's going on here? I can tell you that's really difficult to do on a 2-stroke because we burn oil with our gas. But I'm going to start with a 4-stroke on that. 4-stroke, it's good. You know, you can use a spark plug to kind of generally tell, and there's charts online that'll show you, you know, if it's real dark and black, you might be running rich. If it's like white looking hazy, you could be lean. You know, if it's got a good tan to it, you know, just perfect little tan, you could be perfect, and you can use that. Now, keep in mind that as long as it's good and tan, you have nothing to worry about and stuff like that. But if it's dark and it's running rich, or if it's running lean, what's important, more important than anything else, is to figure out what part of the throttle range it's running rich or lean. So that's where it can get a little bit difficult. You know, in the drag racing world on the cars, what they would do is start the car up, go right down the strip right away, shut it off, pull a plug. They only want to read what it's doing at full throttle. They don't want the idle mixture to get in the way. So keep in mind that when you're using a plug to try to set your air-fuel ratio, different circuits, different throttle ranges can all interfere with that. Personally, I don't really typically use a spark plug to tune my bikes. What I like to do is put my bike on the track, ride it, and I tune it by feel, just strictly how it feels. I don't care how that spark plug's looking. Later on, when I'm like, man, this bike's perfect, I got it tuned in so perfect, then I might pull out the plug and see how it looks, and, you know, just kind of see how it looks. But I'm more concerned about how it feels than I am how it looks. I'll tell you that right now. And it's the same thing with, like, even sag. I don't sit there and just chase down sag numbers consistently, and then once I get that magical number, I know I'm good. I go by how it feels. I keep changing the rear shock until that bike's feeling perfect, and then maybe I'll pull out a measuring tape and see what I ended up with and compare the static sag to the rider sag and all that kind of stuff. But I first go by feel, get the best feeling I can get without even knowing what the number is. That's the way I like to tune. And of course, the 2-stroke is even more difficult at looking at plugs because of, again, we're burning oil. Let me give you a good example. How does that plug right there look to you? Pretty dark, pretty nasty, huh? Ugh. Let me tell you something. I'm not bragging or anything, really I'm not. But if you know me and you know my bike and you're in it, you would, I'm guarantee you're going to say that's probably one of the best jetted in bikes you ever ridden. It is so crisp, so clean. I've spent a lot of time getting that thing dead on. That spark plug came out of that bike. Now, yeah, it was in there for about 20 hours. But it came out of that bike. So you wouldn't expect a bike that runs so good and so clean to have a plug that looks like that. But that's just how 2-strokes are. So just because your 2-stroke plug comes out looking like that doesn't mean you're rich. And doesn't mean you need to chase down your jetting. Now, I will admit this one was probably used at the last ride on kind of a slower trail ride. Sometimes I go on trail rides with my wife, but still, they come out looking like this after they've been in there for a while. That's just, we burn oil in these two-strokes, and that's how it is. So I like to go by the feel, how the bike feels. That's why it's real important to know what your bike feels like. And I have videos on how to jet your bike in and everything like that. You can go through my videos and I discuss all that, but it's real important to know how to feel what is lean, how to feel what is rich, and the different circuits of your carburetor and different throttle ranges, and tuned by the feeling and not so much by what the plug looks like, because that thing can be deceiving. And if you're interested down in the description, I will put 3 links to the 3 videos I made on how to jet in your 2-stroke carbureted bike. If you're curious, because like I said, I don't go by plug color, I go by feel, and sometimes the best feeling bikes are going to have not the best looking plugs. That's just how that goes in this 2-stroke world. Alright, now, have you ever had a plug come loose while you're riding? I know I have. I've had plugs just come completely out and the bike goes brrr. You don't want that, especially on the face of a jump. They have these crush washers, they call them right here. These things crush down as you tighten up the plug, and it's supposed to help the plug seal on the cylinder head and everything like that. But you have to crush this down all the way down. Here's a used plug. You see how it's flat? See, there's a new plug. See how fat it is? So I'm going to bolt this one down right here on camera, and I'll show you what I mean. It takes quite a bit of turns to crush that sucker down, right? So let me go get a wrench. Okay, I got it bottomed down by finger here. Alright, so let's see here. You can see the G is turned towards us. You really want to bottom it down good. There it is. So let's see where the G's at now. The G turned almost a little more than a half a turn. So you want to bottom it out and crush that crush washer all the way down, and then snug it up to that pretty dang good. If you don't crush that crush washer all the way down, you're at risk of your plug just coming out on you, right? And don't be scared if you pull your plug out later in the future. It's a brand new plug. I'm going to put this plug in my bike and use it. It's okay. Just always make sure you bottom it out all the way to the bottom. And I'll show you like a used plug here. This one's already been at the bottom. It's already crushed down. So, but that's okay. You just tighten it up and just snug it down. But let's see how far this one turns. Okay, we got the M right there faced at us. So let's see. That's it. That's all it did, and it was tight because that one's already been crushed down. But that's okay. The whole point is make sure the first time you put a plug in that you completely crush the crush washer. Tighten it down until you really can't spin it that easily anymore. You can't tighten it up that any tighter very easily, and snug it up against that wall. That way it doesn't come loose on you. And the same applies with the 4-strokes. They have the crush washers too. You don't want these plugs coming loose while you're out riding. Not only that, when they come loose, they have a tendency to rattle the whole time as they're slowly working their way out, and they can actually wear out the threads in the cylinder head from that vibration. So you don't want that. Make sure you tighten these things up, and you completely crush the crush washer as you're tightening it up, and snug it up against that. On these 4-strokes, it's easy to follow the torque specs if that's what you want to do. I just do it by hand personally. I don't have a problem with that, but if you don't trust your hand, it doesn't hurt to break out the torque wrench and torque them down that way. On the 2-strokes, a lot of times it's tough to get a torque wrench on them because we're digging underneath we don't take our tank off to change our plugs on 2-stroke like you do a 4-stroke. So we're just using a wrench or a spark plug wrench or just whatever, crescent wrench, you know, and we're just going by feel. Important thing is that you completely crush that crush washer so your spark plug does not come loose. And I think that's pretty much all I have for you guys in this one on spark plugs. I appreciate you guys watching this, and I appreciate all my subscribers out there. Shout out to Bunny Man. Thank you for the prayers and stuff, man, and the well wishes. I didn't get to ride this weekend over here in Florida. It rained all weekend, which was good because I was actually peeing blood, which is really crazy, right? I went to the doctor. I'm getting all that checked out. It's actually clearing up as we speak, so it might have been just from dehydration. That's what they said. Who knows? But so it's probably a good thing that I stayed off the bike. Wear your kidney belts, man. I'll tell you that. I did a long FTR race last week. I don't know if it was from that. Who knows? But hey, Bunny Man, I appreciate it. I appreciate all you guys. Next weekend, I think I'm going to go out to MX-74. Remember that track that closed down, MX-74? It's open again. Is that awesome or what? And I think I'm going to go check that out next Saturday if all goes well. So I hope all you guys had a good weekend of riding wherever you're at. And I hope you have a good weekend ride next weekend. Appreciate you. Catch you next time.